Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We have an amazing set of people from around the country. And before we get started, this is just huge. It's a huge moment for all of us around the country, around the world. And our last few webinars have been about connection to purpose, about embodiment. How do we embody and use all of ourselves, bring our full selves, our bodies, our breath to this work. And today we're going to be talking about radical connection. Our future webinars will talk about strategy, and I think that order feels very appropriate right now in this moment. Only from the connection to ourselves, each other, and with our purpose deep in our heart and our guts can we actually develop the strategy and change the strategy to move forward in this time. So I want to invite everyone, before we get started, actually to take a few breaths together. You can stay sitting, you can stand. I'm going to choose to stand. And in whatever ways that you need to stand or sit, I want to invite you to put a little bit more of your weight on the front of your seat or in the toes so that there's a slight lean forward. This is not a moment where we can lean backwards and be on the defense, and this is not a moment to be neutral. And yet we need to be grounded. So get in a position that you feel comfortable, you can feel the ground, you can feel yourself. And let's take 3 big breaths together. Big, long exhale. So let's breathe in and breathe out. Big breath in. Big, long breath out. And last one all together, and let's feel ourselves breathing from across the country and around the world. So big breath in. Take extra long, letting your breath out. Thank you, everyone. I know that in this moment, I need to catch my breath and remind myself to breathe, so thank you. So we have folks from all over the country. Thank you so much for joining. And just a reminder, when you do chat, make sure you set your the chat function to everyone so that people from across the webinar can all see you. So appreciations, we have a fantastic set of folks doing amazing work connected across movements. And so really appreciate people coming from around the country, around the world. So we're going to take just a couple minutes to let a couple people join. I think there were a couple folks with technical difficulties, but we're going to get started. So this is our 4th webinar. This is our webinar on transformative movement building. Some of you joined us in the last several, so welcome back. And some of you are joining for the first time. Welcome. My name is Mimi Ho, and I'm the co-director of Movement Strategy Center. We are partnering with a longtime partner, Move to End Violence, and it's a program of the Novo Foundation that aims to strengthen leaders, organizations, and the movement as a whole, working to end violence against all women and children. And over the years of this partnership, we have informed and shaped each other's work. This series is an opportunity to share this work with all of you and anyone that's interested in how to build powerful movements for social change. We hope these webinars will introduce some shared language and concepts and help spark more conversations about the kind of movement we need and how we'll get there. When we developed this webinar, we didn't quite realize the world that we would be in, although many of us have been training through all along to be prepared for this moment. And so again, the webinar has been building on leading with vision and purpose, leading with embodiment through practice, through physical practice, bringing all of ourselves and really practicing what we preach. Today's webinar is on radical connection. And as many of you have shared from in this moment, that connection is what is allowing us to stay whole, and it's also allowing us to connect and develop the strategy that is yet to come. But we can only do that first by being in touch with our purpose, being in touch with each other, and breathing and staying connected to ourselves. So today we are exploring that connection, and we have the timing, it couldn't be more perfect to be speaking with who we're speaking with. Our objectives today are to introduce an ecosystem perspective and the role of interdependence and interconnectedness in building radical connection. We want to understand about how building a bigger we leads to greater understanding and shared purpose, and that's so important in this moment. To explore new ways of being that heal past harms and create a culture of accountability. So this connection is not just connection, bonding, it's actually something that allows us to go deeper. A few quick housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this webinar, and so you can request this link, and you'll get links in the email, and you can share this with other people who are not able to be on this webinar. If you are on social media, you can use the hashtag Transformative Movements, no spaces. We've also reserved time for question and answer towards the end, and there are other ways for you to participate along the way. Many of you have already seen the chat function. That is a great way to share throughout the webinar, connections, thoughts, questions. And for technical difficulties, you can also set it to all panelists, and we can make sure to help you that way. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a couple of options. Q&A. This allows you to ask a question directly to the panelists. And we'll keep an eye on this throughout the session, and we'll also return to some of these questions at the end. Your big questions and big answers to each other in this moment are very important to us and to all of us in our learning. And again, you can use the chat function to stay in touch with each other. So today, we're very, very fortunate to have two amazing folks to speak with us. We have Marcia Olivo of the Miami Worker Center, who's been working hard on the ground, and we'll get to hear more about what she's been doing. Amazing work before the election, stories from the election itself as well. She will be sharing stories about connection and how community and connection can play a role in movement building. But first, we're going to hear from my colleague here at Movement Strategy Center, Nwamaka Agbo, who is an innovation fellow at Movement Strategy Center focused on building our next economy. Nwamaka will give us some context about radical connection and building a bigger we in transformative movement building. And here we go, Nwamaka.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Mimi, for the introduction. Like Mimi said, my name is Nwamaka Agbo, and I have the pleasure of being the Innovation Fellow here at Movement Strategy Center. Like Mimi said, this webinar is extremely timely. I'll say this is a moment where I feel deeply challenged. This is a moment where I want to run to protecting my friends and family and holding them in the safety of my arms. And I also know it's a time when I need to be opening up my arms and building the bigger we and inviting other folks to be with us in this moment as we move forward in addressing all the challenges that are before us in this country. Yesterday, we had an opportunity to have a conversation with Norma Wong, and I think Norma said it best when she explained that this moment has only helped to uncover and take the lid off of all the challenges that we knew already existed, all the things that we've been struggling for to support our communities. It has exposed it in a way where we can no longer deny how we need to come together and unify as one to do this work. In this moment, I think I'd also lift up, it presents an opportunity for us to meet at the intersections of our movements. This is an opportunity where we kind of get to draw that Venn diagram of where the communities that we organize and we center in our work meet, and figure out in that space in which those circles overlap, what are those true solutions? What are the third ways that we can start to move forward to put forth new solutions that actually create true liberation and freedom? Going into the concept around radical connection, when I started to do this new work around the new economy and trying to understand what it was of people who want to, relaunch the cooperative movement and do sustainable, locally grown food, and even engage in this area of impact investing, one of the things I recognized in myself is I constantly felt challenged, and I constantly questioned whether it was actually my right to engage in this work and to engage in this moment. And after spending some time and really understanding what those feelings of shame and inferiority were coming from, I came to understand that it's actually the way our economy has been designed. Our economy has been designed to extract labor, to extract people out of their communities, to exclude certain communities from the deep investments that they need in things as basic like affordable housing and a grocery store. And the ways our economy structure actually signals who's worthy and who's not worthy. And I had come to a point where I had internalized these feelings, and the fact that I grew up in a working poor family with a family on food stamps. My parents being two immigrants from Nigeria that worked really hard to provide for their kids as much as they could, and they did an amazing job. And even through that experience of never feeling like we had enough, that experience of being told and internalizing a narrative around scarcity led me to feel like it wasn't my place to engage in this work. And so I embarked on a path of healing and really trying to understand where that came from and what it was serving and what it wasn't serving. And that path around healing created an opportunity for me to pause, for me to observe, and for me to understand what are new narratives that I needed to be building for myself and for the movement, so that we as people of color, impacted communities from different religions and sexualities, can actually see ourselves centered in the new economy. And so my work at Movement Strategy Center provides me the opportunity to actually look at what are the practices and models that we can put forth that actually help to center impacted communities, those that have been locked out and left behind from our economy, and being able to center those communities through practice of restorative economics as a pathway to just transition. Because when we actually acknowledge the hurt and pain that has been done to these communities, we can then provide them and us an opportunity to heal. And then we can actually start to put forward true strategies that bring us towards equity. No, we want equity, all the good stuff, my bad. And my fear is that when we rush really quickly to do new economy work and take on all the cooperatives and do impact investing, that we actually do ourselves more harm and may end up replicating the same harmful structures when we don't take that time to pause and to heal and to have new practices moving forward. So radical connection is an invitation for us to recognize our humanity in each other, our humanity in our movements, for us to wrestle with really hard and complicated challenges together so that we can actually get to the good stuff. We can get to the third way and where we meet in the middle of what are the things that serve all of our communities. And so with radical connection, we have an opportunity to move from relationships that are transactional to those that are transformational. And this is an opportunity to move beyond empathy, when we can move beyond empathy and actually acknowledge and name the places where we have tension, where we have disagreement, where we may even have misalignment in our movements. Those are the places that we can actually begin to understand where we may be misreading each other, misunderstanding each other. And then we can actually start to develop those new solutions for working forward towards justice. And so coming back to this place around healing, one of the things that came up, I've had the pleasure of attending Movement Strategy Center's Transitions Labs. And the Transitions Labs have been a place to explore what are the big leaps that we need to take to move forward in our movements? How do we actually get to that shared vision together? And every time I go into this space thinking I'm going to talk about new economic models and different ways of doing the share economy that's not corporatized, I always end up leaving with a profound sense about how important healing is for me. And healing, I want to lift up, is healing is not an end state. I see healing as a process. Healing as a place in which we build the capacity to continue leaning into those places that feel uncomfortable, that feel tense within ourselves and within our movements, so that we can continue to do the good work that needs to be done. And so one of the things that's come up for me in participating in the Transitions Lab is being able to co-convene a Black Women's Freedom Circle. I'm able to convene this space with Mia Birdsong, who's a dear friend of mine. And what has been profound is that we as Black women working in a number of different areas find that what has been so helpful in this moment is the opportunity to name our hurt and our pain, and quite truthfully, our feeling of betrayal from the rest of the country. And with that, still being able to be in a place where we can start to figure out what are the new strategies, what are the new skills, what are the new ways we need to be forming connections with other people so that we can all protect our communities and loved ones. And so healing increases connection, and it allows us to leverage our impact. And radical connection requires centering those that are often left out and left behind at the margins. And so for those of you that may still be, going over this piece around healing and whether it makes sense, I'll tell you personally, it's something I grappled with a long time. There's stigma in my own personal family around taking the time to acknowledge our own hurt and pain. And I'd invite you to think about what type of healing would serve you and serve your loved ones and serve your movement. And so we recognize that this work happens in an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of many actors moving down differentiated paths. But one of the things we want to really be clear is that the ecosystem in which we do our work, whether we're working in different sectors, from education to youth organizing to food justice work, we're all operating within an ecosystem. And our work needs to be based on interdependence and interconnectedness, because whatever shifts in that ecosystem will in fact end up impacting the rest of us in one way or another. And so our ability to really build this bigger we, and our ability to acknowledge that we are in fact existing in an ecosystem creates an opportunity for us to be in deeper alignment with one another and with our movements. The other piece I'll say is that the ecosystem perspective is an opportunity to really recognize the unique gifts and talents and strengths that we bring to this work. And in this moment, I think this is a place where we need to be able to name what those gifts and talents are, because we're going to need all of it to work together so that we can actually address the problems that are before us. And so when we think about the bigger we, the bigger we is an opportunity to kind of take off our blinders, to move beyond our peripheral vision and to take a 360 view of who's with us, who is ready to do this work, and being able to invite all of us into the same space, regardless of the issues that we're working on, regardless of our own unique tactics that we may want to enlist, but recognizing that we're all trying to move forward to the same shared vision of freedom and liberation. And in order to build the bigger we and to sustain the bigger we actually need to have those transformative relationships that keep us rooted in purpose. These transformative relationships are ultimately the things that keep us together when we disagree and when we may have tension. So when MSC started the organization over 15 years ago, our movements were fragmented, they were isolated, and they were unaligned. And we were fighting and competing for resources. I think oftentimes we can see this backward. The environmental movement was in one camp, the labor movement in another, and all separate from the Black liberation movement. This moment has created a heightened awareness around our need to be in alignment. It's actually uncovered the places where the things that are untrue about our movement and the places where we are actually connected and we are actually truly working towards the same shared vision. I think one of the things that's been really exciting for me, I recently saw an article about how the Palestinian and Jewish college movements on campuses have actually used this moment in our country as a time to come together in solidarity. I find that to be truly transformative. I know that that may not be the thing that completely addresses the challenges that are happening in Palestine right now, but it does create an opening for us to go with those that are ready and creating the bigger we to do the good work that needs to be done. I think we also see alignment in movements like the school to prison pipeline, where people who are fighting for quality public education also understand that they need to be fighting to end mass incarceration and to cut off that pipeline that sends our young people away into a system that does not rehabilitate but actually creates more harm. And even with Standing Rock and Black Lives Matter all convening in North Dakota to understand that our fight for self-determination, for autonomy, and our fight for land and water are all intertwined. And our ability to be in solidarity with one another doing this work is actually the thing that gets us free. And in this moment, I think it's important to lift up that solidarity is an opportunity for us to be actively engaging in the efforts that set us all free. I think allyship is helpful. I think we want to move beyond allyship to solidarity, because solidarity is a place where we do really understand that our fate is intertwined with one another, and that's where we struggle for our collective liberation. And so to kind of give an example of what the bigger we looks like, on the first webinar, we were fortunate enough to have Navina Khanna, who started off as a fellow at Movement Strategy Center, talking about her work with HEAL and the food justice movement. And what she eloquently shared in this example was really being able to lift up how HEAL was an opportunity to align organizations that were on one hand fighting for policies that supported family farms, but also recognizing the issues impacting workers and workers' rights issues on those same farms, intertwined with the issues around poverty and hunger in our urban centers, and then this piece around land sovereignty and land liberation. And so the food movement, I think, is a great example of how we see that a number of different issue areas are actually intersecting and interconnected. And if we can understand the differentiated paths that we're all going down, whether it's environmental or racial justice work, climate change, or healthcare, that we're all trying to get towards that shared vision of liberation. And so the bigger we is an opportunity to figure out who are those additional allies that we could really bring into our work to bolster our impact. And so this opportunity to think about the third way is really an exciting time where we actually get to be free of the either or thinking that we're oftentimes confined to, and being able to really put that and in our sentence. What can we do? And being able to bring together movements, organizations, and people where we can where we can work together for our shared freedom. I think this is a place to kind of just give another example as we're, trying to wrap our heads around these concepts. The and thinking is an opportunity for us to recognize that in our movements we may have different tactics, but that we're moving towards the same thing. And I think this was really clear during the Civil Rights Movement, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. advocated and pushed for a nonviolent movement. In the same breath, we also had Malcolm X really telling Black communities that they needed to take control of their own liberation. And so for the quote-unquote establishment, it made it hard for them to target and to understand what was happening within this movement. But we ultimately knew, as those that were engaged in it, well, I wasn't engaged, I think I was engaged in it, ongoing part of it, but understood that we were ultimately working towards the same thing, ultimately working towards civil rights, freedoms for all. And so this is an opportunity in which we can begin to think about how to transcend the either or thinking and move into the third way of shared purpose and alignment. And so radical connection is this place in which we really bring together the bigger we, and we bring together the third way. It's an opportunity for our movements to start to delve into those courageous conversations, those conversations that we may have avoided because they were hard or challenging, or we didn't quite trust the people who were having them with, to actually understand what is true and what's not. And taking those things that are true about our communities and about our movements in order to chart a new way forward. And so building on our connections to grow the bigger we, it helps to cultivate deeper alignment and a shared purpose. And we continue to nurture these connections and grow by utilizing the third way as a strategy to explore those tensions and differences in our movements in a constructive way that actually helps to generate new solutions. And so, given the political climate that we're in, this movement moment, we're already seeing that those who are ready are starting to go. And we need to identify who are the groups, who are the organizations, who are the people in which our work resonates and connects with those, and are they ready to leap? Are we actually ready to leap into new solutions that may be outside of our organizational mission, that may be outside of the 501c3 structure, to actually take on new strategies that help to address the root causes of what got us here to this moment in our country? A shared vision and purpose, as well as shared values and embodiment, will support moving together towards interdependence. And it allows us to maintain the integrity of the whole while taking strategic action. This is an opportunity for us to actually let go of our old habits and patterns and to move with those that are ready and willing. It's an opportunity for us to see our friends moving down their own paths that may look different from ours, and to give them a high five and know that we'll see them at the other end of it. Divergence can oftentimes be an iterative process. But it's ultimately a process that, when we're intentional about it, it can help to generate new ideas and new solutions. Healing creates more possibilities for choice. It allows us to develop practices that can move us forward. And we as individuals have to be engaged with our own healing and attending to our own relationships with each other in order to develop new practices to advance our shared vision. A movement ecosystem perspective, a sense that we're all in this together and we all have an important role to play, and practices that help us cultivate our connections will help us move in those differentiated ways towards our shared vision. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nwamaka. I just always deeply appreciate, Nwamaka is an incredible strategist and always has incredible insights, and the fact that you bring such depth of connection and healing to that strategy. Just, I think, makes it so much more real. Thank you. So next, I would like to introduce Marcia Olivo, who has been holding it down in Florida for a long time. I really, really appreciate her joining us. She is the director of the Miami Workers Center, and they are in South Florida. They organize and develop the leadership of working class Black, Latino women and femmes for racial, economic, and gender justice. Marcia has been doing this work of radical connection for a long, long time, and will continue doing that. So, Marcia, I want to ask you, you talked a lot about how radical connection and organizing work is so important to the organizing work that you do. Share a little bit about what that meant, what radical connection means for you, both before the election and now even more so after this election.
Yes. Hi, everyone. What a moment to be having this conversation. Huh? When Mimi and I would prep, like we have the first session when we were prepping for today, we have a total, or I had put together like a total different, like it was a beautiful, really nice presentation, and that included, let's talk about our work with at the Miami Workers Center, and let's talk about where we are right now and all that. And then we have election night. And that changed the presentation and the work, the connection that I actually want to have with everyone who's on this webinar today. Because what I feel that, I don't know, in your places, but people are looking for community and people are looking for spaces to stay connected. And I think that if we're going to talk about radical connection, let's start doing that here. I don't know if radical, but at least let's stay connected. So I want to talk a little bit about the Miami Workers Center as a way of giving a little bit of context of what's happening and our perspective on and what happened on election night and what's the things that are happening here right now. So the Miami Workers Center has been around for over 15 years. And we have been, like, when you talk to people around the country and about the Miami Workers Center, the things that people know and the organization is well known for is because the housing work that we had done, and also because we had invested a lot of time and resources in building relationship and community and alignment between immigrant communities and African American communities, right? So, so everybody around the country thinks, people think that we are expert on that, right? And they call our organizations and they're always looking, and we get so many emails because, hey, can you share your curriculum? Can you talk to us about this, all the beautiful work and all that you've been doing in building relationship and with Latinos, immigrants, and African Americans. And the reality is that we have done a lot of work, but it's also like building connection and staying in community and relationship. It's very messy. It's not like a clean cut that we can share the curriculum and everybody can apply it and it will be beautiful and we stay connected. It requires a lot of work, and it requires also a lot of healing, and it requires a lot of intentional work to stay connected. So when people are calling us and asking to share our wisdom around building a community and staying connected and building all these share, like, all the black and brown, the curriculum around the black and brown unity that we have been able to build. Like what I said to people is actually, we don't have a curriculum. We have invested and we have done a lot of work, and we don't want to, like saying like the curriculum that we will have is the same one that you probably have in political education, right? But to do that work, it's not a one-day thing. We have to do that every day, and we have to do intentional work. And the reality is that it's not like we don't have an answer. We don't know, like, it's not that we have done the perfect work, because one day, like being in community, being in radical connection, being in connection is not like it's not a clear path to that. It's like dancing. I was sharing like with Mimi the other day that it's like dancing. Like one day we find the rhythm and we do it and we are so connected and we can dance beautifully. And next day we get lost and we can find the rhythm, but we stay dancing. We keep and we continue dancing until we go back to that path. And we have been, so the Miami Worker Center has gone through a lot of transition, right? Since 2012, when the founders of the organization left. So we have been going through a lot of transition. And that has been really hard for the organization, right? And especially for those connections and those the work that was done before, because people are attached to that identity, and that's, identity is sometimes a part of how we build connection. So we, in 2014, I was asked to step in as director of the Miami Worker Center. And part of the work that I had to do was to do an assessment of what is needed in the movement here and why the organization, like, what is the contribution that the Miami Worker Center still can do to the movement, to the broader movement here. And one of the things that we saw at that time was that leading with a gender lens is one of the things that is missing here. So imagine that this is an organization that has been around for 15 years, and the work has been centered around racial and economic justice. And although women have been the one doing the work, they had never been at the center, and it has never been about their experiences and how those issues have been impacting their life. So then we say, okay, this is what is missing. This is going to be our contribution to the broader movement here. So just right there, like that brought so much struggle and contradictions and internal fights and people threatening to leave the organization and all that. And then we also say in the process, you know what, if we are talking about, so if we are saying that in moving forward, we're going to be a gender justice organization, and that's the work that we're doing, we cannot talk gender without having conversation and also bringing in the LGBTQ community and bringing transgender women into the space. And imagine like how, like that was all, that became even more messy, right? And so it's been 2 years since that. And the only thing that has been, the reason why we're still here is because we made an intentional decision to stay connected. And it's not clean, it's not beautiful. It's very challenging, but we stayed, and because that at that moment when things were not clear, that's when more than ever it was important for us to stay connected, right? So I am saying all this because then we have the electoral process. And during that process, we also have been organizing domestic workers. So we've been doing a lot of intentional work around who should we center on the work that we do? And we are organizing domestic workers, right? So during the electoral process, we were like, okay, let's talk about power and the fear that is out there, and how do we also change and shift the perspective around power and who has power and who doesn't have power. So so on that, during the electoral process, we were like, okay, we have over 100,000 domestic workers here. Part of the problem is that we wanted to pass legislation to protect domestic workers, but we don't have allied men and we don't have people who, so we need to get leaders and elected leaders who can be on our side. So we said, like, we're gonna send, like, part of, like, we put the plan together and we're gonna get the domestic workers and a lot of undocumented people to go out and knock on doors, and we're gonna get this done, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna do the work. And we did it. Actually, we have, like, all these domestic workers that has been on the street, knocking on doors, making phone calls, like, day and night. And then we even have, like, those were local domestic workers. Then we have national domestic workers that came here. We have like 45 domestic workers that came here to help us do the work. So I want to share a story with you. The day before the election, when the National Domestic Workers Alliance, some of the domestic workers that came here with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, we put together a plan, and we decided that, where we were sending people, were going out knocking on doors. So it was our mistake, the organizers, that we put together, like, we didn't realize that we didn't have a English speaker in one of the groups. So we decided, like, we put all the groups together and gave people the map. You're going here, you're going there. Next day, like that night, we're having a debrief, and some of the domestic workers, some of the team came back, and they were like crying and afraid. And I went into this neighborhood that it was mostly African Americans, and people were yelling and screaming at us. And, and immediately, like, people went into that mode. Some people around, like, that community, and like, all that beautiful Black and brown unity, none of that was there. Like, we went back to the default that is in many of our responding to what has been in there, right? So we had it to, that night, I feel that if we don't have that was a challenge that night for us to stay connected and to stay focused. So we had it to that night do some political education, but also do some healing and bringing people together, that even at difficult times like that, what we had it to see is people's humanity, because that's the only thing that can help us pass through. Also, like, let's be clear on one thing. In building radical connection and staying in radical relationship, one thing that we know at the Miami Worker Center is that you had to have some guidance. You need to have some principles that guide the people that you stay in connected, and the process will stay in radical connections, right? And that is, like, what are the principles that are guiding the work that you're doing? Because there are some people out there that doesn't mean that when, like, for the purpose of this space here and this webinar, I am not saying that I have the answer to what it means to be in radical connection. But what I do know is that I have some values, how we, at the organization that I'm leading, and also me at the individual level, how I connect with people. And those values, that is what guides who I stay in community with. So, so then we have election night, and we are doing a watch party, and everybody's there at the watch party. So it was a very sad night, right? Because we did more, like, we went beyond, like, what was expected from all of us to do, like in knocking on doors. Like that night, one of my coworkers got attacked at one of the poll places. Everything, all kind of crazy things happened, but we stayed there because we were committed to the liberation of, like, I mean, I don't want to even say, like, we were committed to the work that we were doing, and we're, like, out there. So that night, I don't even want to remember, like, thinking about that made me, like, brings a lot of anxiety to me. And a lot of blaming and a lot of shaming started happening right there at the moment. And and that has been a challenge because, like I said before, you know, I'm having to decide who are the people that we stay in community with, who are the people that we stay connected with, and also like trying to have an understanding of what happened during the election, and also because what happened there is also a reflection of our everyday. And so that night, one of the things that came up to us was that, again, we need to stay in community, but also we had to have some principles on who are the people that we stay in community with, right? And doesn't mean that all the people that we stay in community with and the people that we stay connected with, that is a beautiful dance. It's not. But if there's alignment around like those principles and the values and the humanity that bring us together, based on that, we can invest on those connections. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, like, you know, a lot of also a lot of struggles and differences came up that night. But one of the things that we know is that none of those things that came up were worth of not being in community and relationship with each other. So being open to stay in community, being open to also open the space, because of reality, one thing that I have seen at this moment is that we need a bigger we for the future that lies ahead. We need a bigger we. And in order to build that bigger we and stronger we really have to stay connected. We really have to open the space for and also like put aside like some of the narrative that I have about some of the people that we connect with, right? And I think the main thing right now is going to be to build that bigger we, is that we have to be able to see people's humanity and intention in moving forward, right? And I think at that time it's really hard, because sometimes, like in staying connected, we see color, we see people's Facebook posts, we see a lot of things, right? But it's hard sometimes. Like we had on Saturday, we have a community healing circle that I don't even want to call it healing, because healing is like requires a lot, but we have a community space. You know, like it was really hard to stay connected. And also, like, because I feel like, at least for me, like a lot of narrative on who are the people that we center. Like, why are you here? You have a lot of privileges. You have this, you have that. But people's humanity are there. Like, pain is pain. You know, like what happened during the election and with the election has been so painful and impactful for so many of us, right? And in recognizing that, I also don't want to take away the fact that, you know, like, although the pain is the same, people's access and connect and access to resources to deal with that pain is totally different, right? And that's another conversation. But how from now, like, how do we stay connected, and how do we be intentional in building a bigger we? And in the process of doing that, like, you know, we need to map out like what is it that we have to do into developing the consciousness of the people who wanted to be in community with us, right? How do we see, like right now, to stay connected, how do we see humanity, and how do we then put together the plan to move people and to develop to be in alignment who is the one who needed to be centered.
Thank you, Marcia. This is the insights that you've given are so alive right now in this moment. So we just have a couple of minutes to build on what you've said. Thank you so much. A question for, there are so many questions that have come up from the group. We only have time for really just a question for both of you. But in this moment, building on the real work you all have done around radical connection in your practice, in your communities, what are some principles that you have worked or that you've been trying to hold in building radical connection that you think we need to center in this intense moment? What are some emerging principles that you think we should keep in mind? So that goes to both of you.
Go ahead. So I think I'll start off to answer this question by saying I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is just to ask people what they need and what that looks like. Since being at MSC over the last year, I've noticed that when people ask me how I'm doing, they actually sincerely mean it, and they make time to actually hear me out. And that goes a long way in terms of allowing a person to feel seen, heard, and acknowledged. In terms of specific strategies for my work, I'm really clear that there needs to be a set of economic strategies on the local, state, and even national level that are focused on reinvesting resources back into the communities that have been disinvested in and neglected. I think that we may find that this will be even more challenging in the years to come. And so I think that this is a place where communities actually get to come together to set the terms for what governance looks like, a governance model that actually provides a space for ongoing acknowledgement of hurt and damage, and uses reinvestment as a strategy to address healing, to make people feel whole once again. And this is actually going to take communities coming together to claim space. As much as we're creating space for healing, we actually need to claim space and claim our autonomy to have self-determination over our own resources. But definitely being clear that we need to reinvest in those communities that have been neglected, and we need to create spaces for people to voice their hurt and pain.
Love it. So very concrete, opening up with what people need, practice of really hearing and listening and building from there, and following up the healing with not just love, but some material, nitty-gritty stuff that actually shows real connection. Thank you, Marcia.
And I think, for me and for us here, the main thing has been seeing people's deep listening, right? That allows us to see people's intention and also to see people's humanity. That has been instrumental in moving forward and staying connected and staying in community here. And I think also that in moving forward and maintaining those relationships, like us who are leading organization, we have to do some intentional work about investing some of our resources into creating spaces for building and to stay connected and to do healing work, and healing work, not just how a friend of mine was telling me yesterday, in a way that makes people feel good, but healing work in a way that makes people go deeper into the things that has been separating us, and also that allows us and the people that we wanted to be in community with to have clear conversation about moving forward. Who are the ones that had to be, without this becoming a marathon, but who are the ones that we had to center first? Who are the ones that we had to shelter first? Who are the ones and how do we use the power, the privileges that we have to protect those? And because reality is that now more than ever, we need to stay connected in community, in solidarity, and love, and in love.
And one last, just to push a little bit on the practices. Someone asked that sometimes, and we all are abundantly aware now, agendas can seem oppositional. It can seem either or. What are practices to ground in this moment, to recognize those differences and yet see that humanity, to look at the structural harm that's been done and also see everyone's humanity? Can you say more about what's needed in this time?
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the key word in the question you raised, Mimi, is the seem. They actually seem that they're in a direct opposition to each other. And we actually don't get to figure out if that's true if we never have a conversation. And so this is a place where we actually do get to send the email, pick up the phone, even tweet at the person if we have to really understand what is the vision for their work? What are the strategies? What are the values that their work is actually grounded in? I think the values actually help us to understand if we're heading towards a shared vision or not. And when we can understand the values, then we can figure out, well, can we, give this person a high five and let them go down their way using strategies that may not be the way we do work, but knowing that we're being grounded in the same shared values. And there may be places where we may find out that we are actually truly in opposition to each other. And then, like Marcia had pointed out, we have to make a decision about who are those that we shelter and protect first and how we go about doing that. And I think it's completely okay for us as organizers, as community builders, as organizations to determine how to best serve our communities, particularly in this really dangerous moment.
Yeah. And Marcia, you're going to get the last word on the questions, but I'm going to add a little twist. What are practices that across differences and also across differences of power, whether it's funder in the field or what's perceived as whoever's, at the margins in that space? What do you do?
I think, in terms of practices, it seems to me that it's twofold. One is at the personal level, I can tell you that some of the things that I've been doing is to checking on people. Like I've been texting, calling people, like the simple question, like, how are you doing? And I feel that we are not used to that people are like, what? Like sometimes people don't know how to respond to that. Like, and I've been doing a lot of that and I think it's also because people have been doing that with me. Like a lot of people have been calling and reaching out just to see how I'm doing. So I'm doing the same thing with other people. Like every day I call and I text because I think at this moment, people just wanted to feel like it's scary out there. So we wanted to make sure that we got us, but that's all what we have right now. So the other thing is in thinking about organization, in terms of practices, that it requires that we do intentional work in defining like what are the values that allow us to stay connected and to decide who are the ones that we're going to be in community and coalition and connected with, right? And also like what are the values that we are going to be implementing within our organizations to stay connected inside, to stay connected with our people, because even now, like inside within our organization, there's a lot of challenges and who voted for Trump or who didn't vote for him. What are like all these things about the economy, like why, and all the craziness that is out there. So there's a lot of challenges within our organization. So as an organization, we have to have some clear values defining how we internally are going to be connected, and we're going to stay connected, and how we're going to be struggling together, but also like who are the ones outside of the organization in building this bigger we. What are the values that are going to bring us together, and how do we create spaces for others that traditionally we, for whatever reasons, we see them as other, right? And others that we can say hello in the way, but we don't see them as part of our collective. And that requires a lot of resources and also intention from everyone that we're in community and relationship with, from funders to other organizations, to everyone. So like I think at this moment requires like a very like clear set of values on how we are going to stay in those radical connections.
Thank you both so much. Our time is up, but we want to really appreciate both of you. The lines you're talking about of building radical connection are not easy ones. They're making sure we have to do it with clear eyes, like you said. Sometimes they're across power differences, sometimes they're across genuine agenda differences, but as Nwamaka said, let's have those conversations to see if that is true. So we have a we have resources for you all. We have a file that is going to be emailed out to you after this webinar on transformative movement conversations. How can we actually take on those conversations that can derail our movements, that can derail our alliances and work together? How do we actually take them head on and come from a place of relationship and love, but also be honest and clear with each other? That will be, you can go to the website at movetoendviolence.org to download that. As I mentioned earlier, this is the fourth of a series of 6 webinars on transformative movement building that we are at Movement Strategy Center presenting along with the Move to End Violence. Our next webinar is right after Thanksgiving, November 29th, Tuesday, and it's on strategic navigation. How do we move with nimbleness and flexibility in this incredibly volatile moment? Very important, and we want to hear all of your insights on that as well. This webinar has been recorded, and so you can access it, again, on the movetoendviolence.org website, along with our practice guides. And finally, we would love to hear from all of you. We'd love to hear feedback so that we can learn how to make these more and more useful in this time. There's a short feedback form that will be coming to you that you can access in the chat and also will be emailed to you. So again, please take care of each other, stay connected, practice the simple ways of connecting with each other that was put out by Marcia and Nwamaka and in the chat, and all the ways of connecting that you know yourselves that are in you and your communities. We look forward to continuing to share lessons and learn from each other and stay connected in this moment. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, November 29th. Thank you all for joining, and stay together.